Mubarak. It is, as always, a pleasure to be with you, and in particular this month, the month of Ramadan. We pray that your fast, these first 5 or 6 days, has been good, and you're feeling the impact and benefit of your fast. We are thankful to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for His mercy. We know that tradition says the first 10 days of Ramadan are the days of mercy, the days of mercy. And the second 10 days of Ramadan are the days of forgiveness. And the last 10 days are the days of salvation. So we thank Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for allowing us to be present this month of Ramadan. We have hopefully a presentation that will both educate you as well as intrigue you. There are some fascinating, really interesting points that we want to make, and so I'm going to do my best to navigate present technology. I'm trying to be hip and cool and move away from PowerPoint to present. I don't know how hip and cool I am so far. So we'll do our best and hopefully make the images that I have here a little bigger for you. That's okay. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. Wassalatu wassalamu ala Rasulihil Kareem. With Allah's name, the merciful benefactor, the merciful redeemer, the praise is for Allah, the Lord creator, cherisher, and sustainer of all the worlds. We ask that the prayers and the peace be upon His most noble and generous messenger, Muhammad. It is our tradition to say Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. May the prayers and the peace be upon him. So, what I'm hoping to share with you this evening is a brief presentation on the Quran in the history of our community. Very brief. The title of the overall class, the 4 or 5 classes that we'll have, is the Quran, Themes in the Commentary of Imam W.D. Muhammad. And last week we talked about language and a language environment, the importance of a language environment, and I mentioned the term theme. Oftentimes we use language, we use words that we have some sense of what the word means. When someone asks you to give the definition of that word, we tend to be at a loss of words and how to define it. For instance, everyone has heard the word theme, right? Theme, Theme, theme. What does theme mean? Anyone have a definition? Feel confident that they can define theme? Theme, Theme. Description, characterization of something. What else? Telling a story. Okay, anyone else? Theme. A repetitive idea. I'm going to read you the definition of theme. Okay? A unifying idea. A unifying idea. Right? So we talk about the Quran, themes in the commentary of Imam W.D. Muhammad. A unifying idea, image, or motif. Motif, that's another word, right? We've heard this word motif, but if someone says, well, what is motif? What is motif? We can, yes. A shorter occurrence of a theme. Yeah. Motif. We should look that word up in the dictionary. It's repeated or developed throughout a work. Repeated, a motif, an image or unifying idea, repeated or developed throughout a work. So when we put that in the context of Imam W.D. Muhammad, the Quran and Imam W.D. Muhammad, what I'm hoping to show is one, this will be a brief history lesson on the Quran, but in our community. But what I want you to see is over time, over decades, there have been common themes, common unifying ideas, right? And what we want to look at is the narrative of the Quran in our community. But what I want to show is that over 30 plus years of teaching the Quran, what happens is as you study that, what emerges are really just a few common themes, right? And as students of the Imam, that's how I've learned to dig deeper and to be able to some extent not only be comfortable with the language. We say the language of W.D. Muhammad, right? The language, that's another broad term. I mean, you say the language of W.D. Muhammad, that could mean different things for different people, right? We would define that differently. But what you want to look for are themes, common themes that will begin to kind of shape and direct our history and our relationship to the Quran. So we dealt with a little bit of this last week, so I don't want to spend a lot of too much time on this, but I do want to kind of bring. I see most everyone are new faces. Almost everyone is a new face from last week. So how many of you were here last week? Okay, so two. Yeah, so two. So we'll review some of that for those of you who were here, and then this will all be new information for you. So here's my attempt to do present. Okay. Okay. So, can all of you all see the video, the screen? If you can't, feel free to get closer. The first picture, you see early years, 1920s to 1950s, 1920s to 1950s. Do you recognize any of these faces on the screen? You can call them out. You recognize at least two of them, right? I would guess probably the ones on the bottom. Yeah, probably the ones on the bottom. Let's talk about the first one here. Let's talk about the first one. I'll try to make this a little bigger too for us. Okay. All right. The first one is Mufti Muhammad Sadiq. Mufti Muhammad Sadiq. Anyone have an idea now that you might not recognize the face, but you'll recognize the name perhaps? Mufti Muhammad Sadiq. So Mufti Muhammad Sadiq is or was an Ahmadiyya. Does anyone know who the Ahmadiyya are? We're talking about the history of the Quran in our community. Okay, and I could go on and on about this, so I'm going to keep it really brief. Mufti Muhammad Sadiq was one of the very early missionaries who came to America to preach Islam from India. This was in the 1800s, the late 19th century, and and the effort to preach the Quran and to teach Islam as missionaries in America. Ahmadiyya, by most definition, are Muslims, but have some different ideas that we wouldn't necessarily accept. Nevertheless, these missionaries were the vehicle for the Quran to come into the hands of our community. Before, there weren't any other Muslims who were preaching necessarily to the African American in the ghettos, right? Of Detroit, of Chicago, of Milwaukee, of New York. It just simply wasn't happening. In fact, Mufti Muhammad Siddiq and those that were with him, among these missionaries from the Ahmadiyya, their main and initial aim was to make da'wah. They were da'i. They were making da'wah to white America, the educated and others. Okay. After some time, they realized that the response was very lukewarm. Right? It was a mediocre response. They weren't getting the response that they intended. Okay. Now I want you to think about late 19th century, early 20th century India. When you think about that, what comes to mind? India, not America, but India. Yes, sir.
British.
The British. Okay. I'm gonna get up. Can I get up and walk around? The British, right? So we have India. What about India and the British?
They had
Colonialism, right? Colonialism. What is colonialism? What is colonialism? Not only establish it, they insist on it, right? They essentially conquer, not only physically, right? That perhaps is the easiest thing to do, but they really begin to conquer the thinking of those people, right? You know, even in Africa now, you look at the judges in some parts of Africa, right? And they still wear the white wigs, right? Right? So this might have been where I had a problem last time. Okay. So India, you have these missionaries. They're called the Ahmadiyya. Okay? Ahmadiyya. I mean, I'm a pretty good student. I don't know about you, but I always have to write things down. So you want to make sure that when you come to class, that you're right, that you have something to write with, take notes. I know some of you are extremely brilliant. I can't remember all this stuff. So you have the Ahmadiyya, and you can say movement, the Ahmadiyya movement, okay? And they were missionaries. And so they come to America and they're wanting to make da'wah, bring Islam to America. But they get a very lukewarm response. So if you think about what's happening in British India, colonialism, you will begin to start having a sense of the strategy that they begin to have. Let me take this off here. little slow here. Okay. So what happens is they redirect their strategy, and they begin to send missionaries into the African American, use this word, ghettos of the late 19th century into the 1900s, 1920s, 1930s. What's happening in America in the 1930s? I think this tells me I've lost my internet connection. I don't think that's what's happening in the 30s? Depression, right? Depression. I'm without going too deep into each one of these things, I'm kind of putting these up there so you can begin to kind of form the environment. There's a climate that's being formed, right? And there's a depression. Now, in the depression, everyone, not just blacks, everyone was hurt. Okay? Not just blacks, but whites. And if whites were hurting during the depression, you can imagine the state and condition of blacks in America, right? So you have the depression. You have obviously racism, right? 1930s America, no civil rights yet, right? So if you consider the climate that African Americans were in, you will then begin to see that these missionaries realized, you know what? They're coming from British India, colonialism, right? Their appeal to the blacks during the Depression and in the ghettos of America was going to be a very strong appeal because their language would be very similar. They understood what it meant to be oppressed. They understood what it meant, right, to essentially have your whole life taken over, right? So I want to mention that as we begin to talk about these first few figures that I have on the TV screen. So Mufti Muhammad Sadiq was an early Ahmadiyya missionary. Okay. Now you might recognize, not by face, the next gentleman. Okay. But you will recognize him by name. By name, and I think I've lost my by name. Okay? Muhammad Maulana Ali. Anyone recognize that name? Yes. And if you were in the class last week, you can't blurt out all the answers. The Quran, right? So, not only have I not figured out Prezi, I haven't figured out my new Apple MacBook. Okay. There we go. Let me get it. It's moving slow on me. So, tell me about Muhammad Ali. What do you know about Muhammad Ali? You said the Quran. What about the Quran?
Well, it's translation.
It's translated, right? So the gentleman that you're looking at here, he's a translator of the Quran. Let's go even deeper. What about the Muhammad Ali Quran? How are you familiar with the Muhammad Ali Quran?
English, the translation.
Mm-hmm.
I was one of the first books we read in the Nation of Islam.
One of the first Qur'ans in the Nation of Islam, right? It was the Qur'an in the Nation of Islam. The Qur'an translated by Maulana. You know this word Maulana if you've read any of the work of another Indian scholar, Indian scholar named Maulana Maududi, right? Imam W.D. Muhammad mentions him often in his lectures. The person that he regarded highly, and Mufassir, one who gives tafsir of the Quran, Maulana is a term often used by India or Pakistan. Maulana, the word wali is in that word, which means protector, right? And interesting that different places will take on different names to describe their leadership, right? Maulana is a person who will protect the interest of the people, right? Protect the interest of the people in India, okay? Maulana Muhammad Ali. So the very first, how many of you were in the Nation of Islam? When did you join the Nation of Islam? Well, you were born. You were born. What year? Way back then, huh? Probably not 1920s though, right? Okay, so we're not way back then. Yes.
Well, I got my ex in 74.
Got her ex in 74. 1972, that was a great year. 74. Okay. So we don't have those pioneers here with us now who could talk about the Muhammad Ali Quran in the 40s or the 50s, right? Maybe not even the 60s. By the 60s, Yusuf Ali was also introduced, right? So I wanted to show you here. I cannot get this to work. You see that gentleman there? Very handsome man here. This is not working for me. I want to make that picture a little bigger. Yusuf Ali. Right? I told you this was going to be interesting. So, I should have stuck with what I knew and did PowerPoint. So we've been reading Yusuf Ali for a long time, right? That's Yusuf Ali. That's who translated the Quran that we're reading. Okay? He too was from British India. Okay? Now I mentioned theme. A theme should already, right? You write whatever that theme is that's emerging, write it down. So here's a theme. We talked about three people who missionaries. Maulana Muhammad Ali translated the Quran much earlier than Yusuf Ali. But Yusuf Ali translated that Quran, and I'm going to read something to you in a moment from the Honorable Elijah Muhammad out of a 1965 publication called Message to the Black Man in America. Now, the words that he uses in Message to the Black Man in America, which was published in 1965, are really borrowed words from earlier books, Supreme Wisdom, some of the lessons, right? Those of you who have a good sense of the history of our community. But nevertheless, I'm wanting you to begin to see how the Quran came into our community and the relationship that we begin to form with this book. Because prior to 1930, right, this month in 1930, right, July 4th, we have the language, the history that we have says that in July 4th, 1930, right, Farad Muhammad came to Detroit and began to preach as a missionary. From where? From the Ahmadiyyas. Okay? From the Ahmadiyyas. Again, from India, right? And if you listen to Imam Muhammad, he said outright that W.D. Farad, W.D. W.D.F. Muhammad, right? Many names, right? That he was from where? From India, right? Or he said, or Pakistan. Or the man says Pakistan, he says Pakistan, right? Right? So here we've got these gentlemen from India that have a strategy to bring the Quran into America. And you have this. As you can see, you know this picture here. Sit down. You know that picture there, right? Down at the bottom, you'll see Farad, or W.D. Farad, right? I'm going to end up just talking this lecture, not having much luck here. Okay. I apologize. I can pull that picture up that way. You all recognize that picture? Who is that? That's Farad, right? That's Farad. That's Farad. So this is the picture that we best know who the Honorable Elijah Muhammad called our Savior, right? Our Savior, right? You have a picture of a man who clearly doesn't look black, right? Right? We can talk about the language and the rhetoric, right? But what you have here, and the reason that I and you can find other pictures, but the reason that I have this picture here is why. Why do you think I have this picture up? He's holding the Quran. He's holding the Quran. This picture was seen by the members of the Nation of Islam, right? They didn't have a lot of pictures, but this picture was a picture in front of us all the time. So we had a sense that there was a reverence for this book. You know, he's looking very reverent. He's looking down, right, at the Quran. Right? Okay. So you know, very nice, clean cut, pen in his pocket. You know, hair nice and neat. Okay. The same man who taught that white man was a devil. Interesting, right? To a nation of black people, right? In lost found nation in the wilderness of North America. Right? All this language was language that Honorable Elijah Muhammad didn't have. He didn't come up with this language. This was language given to him by this man here. And this man was a Ahmadiyya. For the most part. I'm going to give you a name of someone that you should look up. She's a scholar in our community, Fatima Fanusi. Fatima Fanusi. She's done her doctoral work on the history of the Ahmadiyya movement in America and their role in bringing Islam to African America. Okay, she went to Howard. I believe now she is in Boston. Okay, someone that we should have here. We should invite her to talk about this very interesting history. Okay, so what I'm doing is I want to give you a sense that the Quran has an origin in our community. It has a beginning, right? It didn't fall out of the sky, right? It came to us in a context. It came to us in a social context. And that social context is very important to consider. It will begin to explain the way that the Quran has been taught early on and how it's then been interpreted and then later reinterpreted by Imam W.D. Muhammad. So now we know this picture, right? Same picture here. Now this picture was a picture that was taken and is now in the museum in Schaumburg, I believe, museum New York, of the African Schomburg Museum of African American History. Very popular picture. This is taken in the Honorable Elijah Muhammad's house in Chicago. And obviously it's a posed picture, right? You know, if someone set this up, right? The photographer said you should stand here and you should put your hand on your father's shoulder and you're going to hold this Quran, right? And then in the back is going to be W.D. Farad and the picture that the Nation of Islam is very familiar with. What do you see when you look at that picture? His successor. So from here to here to here. Okay. Any other thoughts? Yes, ma'am. A big Quran. Yes, a big Quran. Isn't that interesting? Here's the Quran. It's not the same Quran. But here Imam Muhammad has a big Quran. At this time, we didn't call him Imam Muhammad, right? What was he called? How was he referred to? Minister, right? Minister what? Minister Wallace, right? The son of the messenger. Huh? Clean cut, nice, handsome young man. In his 20s, perhaps no older than about 30 years old. And there he is holding the Quran. All right? Three wise men. Three wise men. Yeah. And I would say that the strategy that Farad, Muhammad Siddiq, Muhammad Ali, the men that we're talking about, they had a strategy to bring Islam, bring the Quran to the African American community. Okay? Despite the language, I would encourage you to study that language and listen to how the Imam has interpreted that language. What a wonderful strategy to bring us to the Quran. Okay? Being that the appeal was mainly through the Bible. Early on, though we had this picture of the Quran, most of the community wasn't reading the Quran. In fact, most of them weren't even, they perhaps would not even touch the Quran.
We were told to keep it on the top shelf.
Yeah, we were told to keep it up on the top shelf. In fact, we were on our way here. I've been listening to this lecture of Imam Muhammad in 2000. He was speaking at the University of North Carolina, Wilmington, and he's giving the history of our community. And he tells a story that early in his childhood, that he recalls his father having in their home a Quran that was wrapped in green cloth. And many of you probably heard this story. A Quran in green cloth, and it was held up high. In fact, the way he describes it is that it was nailed to the wall almost, right? And the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, he didn't read the Quran. He didn't read Arabic. He didn't know Arabic. Perhaps he picked up a few words here and there. But Imam Muhammad tells the story that at one point, though he couldn't read the Quran, he was smart enough to hire a man to teach the students in the University of Islam. Okay, the University of Islam. And we called it the University of Islam, though it was not a university. Right? It was teaching. Right? It was teaching the youth, young people, right? Kindergarten, first grade, second grade, right? 7th grade, 8th grade. So they called it university. And he hired a man named Jamil Diab. And Jamil Diab was one of a number of Arabic instructors that the Honorable Elijah Muhammad hired to teach the students at the University of Islam. And he would teach them Arabic. And so Imam Muhammad tells this story that that during when you're learning Arabic, of course you're going to recite some verses from the Quran. You're going to learn how to read those verses from the Quran. Though his father couldn't, he could. And he said that one day his father said to him and his younger brother Akbar Muhammad, who is now who went to Azhar, studied there, Anwar Muhammad arranged that some of his children and others could go to Al-Azhar and study. Right? So though Anwar Muhammad was preaching one message, right, he was also strategically encouraging his children and others to learn Arabic, right? To learn Islam, right? So it almost seemed like there was kind of a contradictory message, but very, very wise. So Akbar and Wallace were asked by their father to go up and get that Quran that's way up high, right? And tell me if you can read that Quran. Tell me what you can read. And he says this because he was told by his teacher, Farad Muhammad, that you will get a new Islam one day and you will get a new Quran. All right, you'll get a new Quran. All right, and if you know the teachings of the Nation of Islam, there's some just really strange ideas that a new Quran, a new holy book every 10,000 years or every 25,000 years. I can't remember exactly what it is. But that the Quran seemed to be something that was new, that you get a new text, right? And so he was told that there will be a new Quran. And so he told his two sons, read that and tell me what you see, right? So Imam Muhammad describes this moment where they get the Quran and they open it up and they begin to read, not out loud, but they're looking at it. And he says that he and his brother look at each other, kind of surprised, right? And they don't really want to tell Daddy that this is the same Quran that Jamil Diab has been teaching us. That it's not a new Quran, it's the same Quran. That there's only one Quran, right? So I tell you that to say that very early on, right, Imam Muhammad was exposed to the Quran. Not like many of the followers in the Nation of Islam. So very early on, he was already exposed at a young age, not only reading the Quran, not only reading the English translation of Muhammad Ali or Yusuf Ali, but actually reading the Arabic text. Okay? I'm talking about the history of the Quran. Alright? Hopefully I'll be able to get through a couple more of these visuals for you. Okay? And you have to remember, this is a class. This isn't a khutbah. All right? So I'm not. Okay? So again, an important picture. It says a great deal. Okay. So it's trying to save, and that's why it's giving me a little hard time. You can't really see here, but you can see down in that bottom picture, you've got a picture of Honorable Elijah Muhammad. Here. And he's holding up a Quran. He's holding up a Quran. He's got fez, right? Have you seen that fez before among African Americans? Not this particular fez with the star and the crescent, right? But who else wore a fez? In the 1920s. The Moors, right? The Moors. The leader of the Moors, the Moor Science Temple, his name was Noble Drew Ali. Noble Drew Ali, right? So you can see we kind of taking a little bit here, a little bit there. There's kind of an identity that's being formed, right? But the main thing here is that all of these men had some regard for the Quran. Back in the 1930s, okay, the 1940s, the 1950s, okay. Still the most interesting thing is that picture of Yusuf Ali, right? We've been reading Yusuf Ali and don't know what he looks like. And then you go, wow, that's Yusuf Ali. This is not going to work for me. I'm going to try to do my best to, and we're going to do it a different way. So, I want to show you another picture.
This was all part of the Jim Crow Act and all this stuff going on.
Jim Crow was a little later. I'm trying to bring that up here. I want you to see this picture. I'm not going to be able to get it too big right now. But can you guys see this? You probably are familiar with this picture too. I'll describe it. You got some FOI in the front here, right? And you got the sisters in the back. There's Sister Sophia right there. Now she wouldn't be back there. She would have been way up here. She would have been sitting back there, right? She would have been. And in the back, and you get a sense that perhaps here there's either someone introducing a speaker, or perhaps the Honorable Elijah Muhammad is speaking, right? But in the back, you've got this really, really interesting picture. You've got Malcolm, right, who seems to be looking at the Quran, right? And next to him, right, you've got Malcolm. He's looking at the Quran, and next to him, you got Wallace, right? You got Wallace, and Wallace is the young man. His hands are folded, and he's sitting, and he just kind of looks like Malcolm is inquiring. Maybe he's looking at a verse. He's asking something about a verse, and Wallace is just like he's listening, right? Like he's making some assessment of what's being said, right? And we know if you read the autobiography of Malcolm X, he speaks of Wallace only 2 or 3 times in his autobiography, but in glowing terms. And says of him that he was different, he was special, and that he would go to him and ask him questions about the Quran. Okay, so we have a picture that's capturing this conversation. That in all likelihood he's looking through something in the Quran, and he's asking W.D. Muhammad, he's asking Wallace about this verse. Okay. Again, we don't know the Quran, but so far at 1950s, 1960s, we're not familiar with the Quran the way we're familiar with it now. So I'm just wanting to give you a sense that the Quran was part of our community. Okay, hopefully this will save, because what I want to do is I want to play for you. Let's see, we're going to do it this way. Patient right here. So in the 50s, who knows where Minister Wallace was the leader? Where there was a temple or a mosque. Do you know what city he was? Philadelphia, right? The city of brotherly love, right? In Philadelphia. And I want to play for you. For you to look it up for me. Don't seem to be getting look like I have internet. How many of you have heard Imam Muhammad when he was 26 or 27 years old, being introduced by Malcolm X. I need to play this. This is so good. Okay, let's try it again. All right, it doesn't look like I'm online. Let's try it again. Well, we'll try to talk through this. Let me read you. I had mentioned earlier that I wanted to read to you something from what is in the message to the black man, but appeared much earlier.
You put the mic up to that.
Can you hear that? This is Malcolm, 1959. Okay? Wallace Muhammad is visiting New York City. Minister Farrakhan has just spoken. Okay? He introduced him, and and now Wallace Muhammad, Minister Wallace, is going to open up. In 1959, he's going to open up the meeting.
Minister Wallace Muhammad is going to open with prayer in Arabic, and after in Arabic, he will explain to you what it means.
This is Imam Muhammad at 26. now the prayer of Ibrahim, right? And remember, this is 1959. The majority, if not all, of the people sitting in the audience don't know Arabic at all. And here's Wallace, and he's reciting the Quran, right? Stop this sort of now. Okay.
I created a Wi-Fi network.
Oh, that'd be great.
If you want, it's just Daniel Short. You just try.
Do you all know Daniel? You all should know him. He's a very special person among us. Very special. Extremely special. He's a advocate for goodness and human decency, relationships, and just a nice guy, you know. So Daniel, how do I? I didn't know you could just create a hotspot.
Yeah, hopefully.
So what are your thoughts about? I'll tell you that Imam Muhammad begins, or Minister Wallace begins to explain Al-Fatiha. He translates it himself. He begins to explain it to the community. He begins to give tafsir early on in 1959. And if you know the language environment of the Nation of Islam, this was very different than what the ministers were preaching. Okay, even Malcolm himself he was the one who introduced. We got it. Okay. So here we have 1959, Wallace Muhammad not necessarily introducing the Quran, but beginning to recite publicly, beginning to recite in Arabic to the community. Okay? And I'm saying that because I want you, the Quran was among us for a very long time. It wasn't just in 1975 that we began to hear the Quran. Okay?
So Malcolm didn't have no clue that he was going to open up the Al-Fatiha?
Oh, he knew.
Oh.
He knew. They might have been discussing it in that picture that we looked at. When you come next week, Minister Wallace, you know. No. And what I was hoping to do in this is to let you hear the kind of development, the kind of the Quran and its place among our community over the decades. Okay, so here you have I'm sorry, Suleiman. Here you have in the late 50s, Wallace Muhammad reciting the Quran, beginning to not only recite it, begin to explain it to us, and explain it in really the language and the social context that our community could understand. Okay. So now what I'd like to do is kind of leap from the late 50s or the 60s to the 70s, and I'd like for you, as we listen to this, I'd like for you to write down some of your thoughts about.
And when we hear it,
So So I'm going to play for you.
Of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad,
Who is this, Sophia?
with the National Secretary 1,000%. I myself honored.
I'm gonna fast forward it, but you can see this obviously. I'm a student of history. This is. You see, you know who that is, right? That's Muhammad Ali, right? That's Muhammad Ali, right? So, and you know who that is, right?
Some of the lessons that he taught
Right,
me
that's Jesse Jackson.
that I hope will stay in your hearts forever.
Right, that's Jesse Jackson.
He knew that self-power was more basic than he.
Okay.
Peace, mercy of Allah and His blessings be with you.
Anyone know who that is?
The ambassador of the Arab League, which
Ali
represents
Baghdadi, right? He used to write for Muhammad Speaks.
and other
Right?
Muslim
So the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, though we were seemed to be a closed community, was very wise. He had people in the right places.
the deepest
Okay?
sympathies.
So he had Ali Baghdadi is here to give greetings to the nation of Islam from the Muslim world. He says that, right? From all the Arabs, from the Muslim world, right?
Sympathies of more than 600 million Muslims in the East.
He's speaking for 600 million Muslims in the East. Okay? Now, I just wanted to show you. I like the. So now they're gonna bring up. We're since 1975. Okay. The Honorable Elijah Muhammad has just passed away about 2 days before, perhaps about 2 days prior. Okay. You know who that is, Sophia? That's Rahman. You know who that is, don't you? Anyone know who that is? That's Rahman, right? He was here in Atlanta. Right? Okay. All right. We interviewed him for Oral History, an African American archival project that I'm fortunate to work on at Georgia State. We interviewed him. He's with the Nation of Islam still. Right? Now,
it was a great day.
Anyone know what that is? I could do this all day. I'm so far away from what I wanted to say to you all, but I'm enjoying this so much.
The Honorable Elijah Muhammad was a wise man. The wisest and the greatest of
Anyone know who that is? That's Kareem Hassan, right? Abdul Kareem Hassan from Los Angeles. Okay. So everyone's speaking. A couple of days after. This is all before they introduce Minister Wallace Muhammad as the next leader of the Nation of Islam. Okay. So we're gonna jump here, and what I want you to think about, or I want you to listen to, is
which is to be recited. I read from the Quran.
Okay. So he's being introduced. Okay. So I want you to think 1975, the end of the first resurrection, right? And what we would call the second resurrection starts, okay?
First to the distinguished, very appreciated President dignified platform we have here. I greet you in peace. Assalamu alaikum. Brothers and sisters in the audience, our friends who are also our brothers and sisters, I greet you too, because you are obviously as dignified as we are.
Now, I want you to think, 1975, February in Chicago. It's cold outside. It's very cold outside, okay? And he obviously understands the magnitude of this moment, okay? Not only for our community, but the whole world is listening. We know that because it's not long after this talk that he's on the front of Jet magazine, okay? So all of Black America is listening, okay? And all of white America, I'm sure, who has ears to hear, are listening. So he understands the magnitude of this very moment. I want you to also consider that he has lost his father. He's lost his father just a couple of days before this, okay? So he's had some time to think. And in all likelihood, he already knew, the community, many of them already knew that Wallace was going to be the next leader, right? He was going to succeed his father. So I want you to, as we listen, I want you to consider what he's saying and what he's going to recite from the Quran.
In the name of Allah, the Beneficent, the Most Merciful, to whom we forever give praise and thanks for his blessing us, a people who just a few years ago, not generations ago, but just a few years ago, were unable to think without having first something of the white man's mind to think with. A people who just a few years ago were unable to meet together on a serious, very serious question and agree. If that question had not previously been given the approval from the white man. So I think the true and living God, who blessed us, who had no head, with a head, the great and honorable Elijah Muhammad. I would like to open my Savior's Day address with a reading from our Bible, which is properly called Quran, a word meaning that which is to be recited. I read from the Quran, chapter 75, section 2. The dead rise. Does man think he will be left aimless? Was he not a small light germ in sperm complete. Then he made of him two kinds, the male and the female. Is not he, and I stop, interrupt this quotation from the Quran to make it very clear to you that he here is the one, the Almighty, the true and living God. Is he not powerful to give life to the dead? All praise is to Allah, the Lord, keeper, the sustainer of all the world.
Okay, thoughts? What jumped out at you about that? So, just like anyone who gives a lecture, gives a khutbah, they have time to consider what verse they're going to present. Why do you think that he read from the Surah 75, right? 75 is the resurrection. Qiyamah, right? Qiyamah, right? The resurrection. Why?
He had to address the fear and the anxiety that the crowd comprehend. Talked about the devil died. He believed in and he said. So I think it was just so appropriate that he could read those verses from the Quran to bring to mind, to make us think about what had happened. That was possible. That this could happen, but also to erase the fear and what I mean.
That's right. What else? Anyone else have any thoughts about that?
I'm thinking that wasn't that at a time where, like you said, the Quran was not being made, the emphasis wasn't placed on the Quran at that time, so for him to read from the Quran, I'm thinking it may be trying to direct people to focus on the Quran instead of a man.
Interesting. So, what?
I'm thinking, was this the same type of relation with Abu Bakr related to Umar?
That's a good parallel. I think that's a fair parallel. Let me. When you listen to that, it's important to kind of jot down some notes. Some of the language that he uses. For instance, the all true and living God. The all true and living God, right? Right? He's addressing he knows his audience. That God is alive. He's not dead. Right? And he's speaking to two different minds here. Right? And early on he says, before I begin to read my lecture, I want to read from our what? What does he say? I want to read from our Bible. Huh? He says, I want to read from our Bible. He doesn't say I want to read from the Quran. He says, I want to read from our Bible. And then he says, which is known, or which is the Quran. Right? So right away, now he's got these two things going on. This is a very, very important speech. Right? He's been thinking about this since 1959, perhaps, or before, when he was standing up in New York when Malcolm introduced him to read, and he read the Quran in Arabic then, right? One thing that you notice here is that he doesn't read the Quran in Arabic. He doesn't read the Quran in Arabic. He reads it in English because he knows his audience. And he also knows that there's more than just Muslims listening to this lecture. Okay? Probably in the temple, in the mosque, in Harlem, probably not a lot of non-Muslims, right? Listening. It's probably mostly Muslims. So he could recite and introduce them to that language. Okay? And not to show off, but to introduce that language into the environment of our community. Okay? So he says, I want to read. Yes, ma'am.
I thought it was scientific. So folk outside of our community who are listening to
Mhm.
it, he's giving you conception
Mm.
and it's scientific and it's undisputable.
Yeah.
So,
He's giving
you know,
conception.
He's letting us know that
Right.
who we are.
What did so one, the Bible, right? And if you listen to the next major address of Imam Muhammad after this, and called Remake the World, he begins this lecture. He says of the Bible that his father told him that the graveyard of my people is the Bible, right? The graveyard of my people is the Bible. And I want, and those of you who are in the Nation of Islam, I wasn't in the Nation of Islam. I wasn't born until 1972. Good year, right? Okay? So I'm 3 years old, somewhere in Texas, just a big curly-haired kid. You know, I have no idea what's going on here, right? So in 1975, he says that his father said that the Bible is the graveyard of his people. And I want us to think about that and see that really it has two different meanings, okay? One is that, yes, to resurrect the people, you have to resurrect them in the graveyard. Where else can you resurrect people that are dead? Except in the graveyard, right? So the resurrection oftentimes that was taking place was in the Bible. We were being resurrected in the Bible, right? Why? Because most of the ministers taught from the Bible. They didn't teach from the Quran, right? I mean, no one was really teaching from the Quran. When you went to the temple, you heard the minister preaching from the Bible, right? Mostly the same verses, the same narratives that the Christian minister was preaching in terms of liberation, in terms of freedom, right? Independence, all those kinds of things. Yes, ma'am.
You know, I was 23 when that happened. When I first became a Muslim, during Ramadan, they used to tell us to read the Quran. And we would ask, well, we're not Muslims, so that was last night's moonlight. So, well, why aren't we reading the Quran? And they would tell us to read the Quran.
Mm-hmm.
And so when Imam Muhammad spoke and said this, that was the first time I'd ever heard him speak.
Mm.
And when he read from the Quran, I remember thinking, that's why we would read the Quran.
Mm.
And, you know, when younger people don't understand why we have so much respect for Imam Muhammad, he could have left us where we were.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. That's right.
You know, when you hear people of my generation say, we will always be thankful to Imam Muhammad, we always appreciate Imam Muhammad, you have to understand, Farrakhan left his people for their work. And Imam Muhammad could have said that free, because from what you said, he knew 20 years ago what it was.
Mm-hmm.
He could have sat comfortable in his own world.
Mm-hmm.
And so for those of us who heard that, you know, it's like you said, we make the world and everything. We bought into the concept that Imam Muhammad has a greater mission for us.
That's right.
Whatever we had in the Nation of Islam was a drop in the bucket in comparison to the great thing that's going to lead us. And so that's why, you know, sometimes my children will say, why they always teaching about Imam Muhammad? Why we always got to hear that? But I think that you did an excellent job tonight of giving us an opportunity to share as to how we felt. Because that, I remember saying,
Yeah.
And I would like to add that when I was in other circles of Muslims who were not familiar with the Nation of Islam, they could not understand the affinity or the love or the affection for W. Muhammad. And I would have to say, trust me, I would not be where I am in my practice if it wasn't for W. Muhammad, because he led us to the understanding of the Quran. If we would not have that, no one else was invested enough in us to take us.
That's right. That's right. He was patient. If you listen to the language, he's using language that is not offensive to the congregation, to the people that he's speaking to, who still were operating on a certain language, right? Yet he was introducing, right, Quranic concepts. So just to finish that thought on the Bible, one, the graveyard of my people is the Bible, that they had to be read. There's no way that in 1930 and 1940 and 1950, I mean, obviously there is a way, because the Quran resurrected many people, right? I mean, the resurrection, and when you think about what was revealed to the prophet, Iqra bismi rabbika alladhi khalaq. Read in the name of your Lord who created man from congealed blood, right? There's that conception again. From the very beginning, right? It's about man being his origins, right? Man being developed, man growing, man coming into his humanity, right? So you couldn't really resurrect African Americans in the ghettos of North America, right? In the wilderness of North America, using the Quran. It would have been foreign for them. So you resurrect them in the graveyard that they're in the Bible, right? And on the other side, he's saying that it also, the language also was what made them dead, right? And that it was the Quran that would give them life. So here, the Honorable Elijah Muhammad is passed, and he chooses to use these words from the Quran, from the chapter resurrection. He calls it, or defines it, the dead rise. That's how he defines it. Not the resurrection. He says the dead rise, right? He makes it active, right? Not the resurrection like a noun, but the dead, they rise. That's how he says qiyamah, right? Now, what does he say? Does man think he will be left aimless? Man, that is so beautiful. Because they just lost the man that they thought would not die. They just lost the man who they gave their whole life to, the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, right? And so the first words of W.D. Muhammad to this community is, does man think that he will be left aimless? That he will be left with no direction? Right? Was he not a small life germ? Was he right? And he goes on, right? The beginning again, right? A clot, so he created him, made him complete. Then he made him of two kinds. He didn't leave out the females, right? The male and the female. So he's appealing now to both the males and the females, right? Is he not powerful to give life to the dead? Now, haven't we already had one resurrection? So now we're going to have another resurrection. So Imam Muhammad says, does man think he will be left aimless? And in this, in a very subtle way, what he's saying is now the leadership that was the Honorable Elijah Muhammad is the Quran. Because that's what he's reciting. So now the leadership is not the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, it's the Quran. Right? So this is how he begins to introduce the Quran to our community. On a big scale. He did it at different temples, different mosques, different settings. But on this stage, on the big stage of the second resurrection, he's beginning to introduce or move us away from thinking about the Honorable Elijah Muhammad as the leader and replacing that affection, that love for him and his work for the Quran. And as it was said, most people don't realize that the affection that we have for the Imam is really our love for the Quran, our appreciation for the Quran, not for him, because we were taken away from that thinking 1975, a long time ago, right? I mean, I don't think there's a person in here who could ever be turned back to thinking that God is man, man is God, right? But the leadership, what will guide man now, beginning in his leadership, will be the Quran itself. Okay? Let me just say this, and I'm gonna close because we're getting close here. The next class we'll look from 1975. We'll jump a decade, and we'll look at what he says 1985 and his 10th anniversary address, and see what verses from the Quran he introduces then, and the way that he introduces those verses. And what you'll find is he reads a lot more Arabic. Right? And you begin to think now, those 10 years from 75 to 85, a lot of growth. You begin to see the growth and know that the Quran has been among the community. It's begin to be taught. And I have something I'll have printed out for us as well. Do you know, Sophia, do you know Fareed Munir? Fareed Munir.
Ma'am, I think you're getting a little twisted.
Yes, ma'am.
You're putting me way back a little too far.
You were really the sky. I was going to you for all the answers. Quite honestly, I was expecting you to. Right. So you'll see in 1985. What I'm wanting to do is to show you how Imam Muhammad began to introduce the Quran to our community, and then 10 years after him teaching it, right, the 10th anniversary, what verses he uses, how he introduces those verses, you begin to see the themes that are coming out of the introduction of the Quran, this relationship that he's beginning to build. And then I'll tell you who Munir Muhammad Farid is. He's a very powerful speaker, and actually introduces when we hear Imam Muhammad next week in 1985 for the 10th anniversary, introduces Imam Muhammad. And I have to stop, and it sounds like Imam Bacha. The cadence, the rhythm. I mean, you're ready to jump out of your seat, right? In 1985, Munir Farid, and he then interviews Imam Muhammad for the 10th anniversary. Okay, all of this stuff. 10 years of progress. 10 years of progress. And then what we'll do is we won't go to the 20 years in 1995. We can spend some time in Detroit, the Juma in Detroit, 1995. But we didn't really have a big celebration. We waited until Louisville and went to the 25th anniversary, right? And either one of those lectures of Imam Muhammad you can listen to and then see the progression again of how he's teaching the Quran. Okay? That's my hope, is to show you how the Quran has progressed and how he's taken these monumental moments or these monumental addresses to share common themes of the Quran, and they don't change very much. Okay, most of this that I'm sharing with you, you can find online. You can YouTube it. You can go to. And I should share this because this is a very, very good website. IWDM Study Library. And they're adding things to it all the time. And actually, I looked at it. Has put together an incredible site. I mean, there is so much information on our community. Transcribed lectures, audio. I mean, audio back to 1975 on. And it's used probably a handful of brothers to just donate all of their tapes, all of their material. You should get on it. Once you get on it, be careful during Ramadan, staying up too late. Because once you get on it, you'll be up all night. You will start reading things that will just really, really blow you away. IWDM, Imam W.D. Muhammad Study Library.
Right.
.com. Is it .com? Maybe .com. .com. Not everything that I'm sharing tonight is from that, but you will be able to have access to really whatever you want to study. Okay. We all should be students of this history. This is our history. It's a special history. It's a very unique, special American story. Not just a Muslim story. It's an American story. And it's not just American story. It's part of the Ummah's history. And we have to see it that way. This is a very special, significant part of the Ummah's history. Okay, our history. Again, going all the way back to the 1920s. You should read this sister, Fatima Fanusi. She's one of our scholars. Did her PhD work with Dr. Suleiman Yang at Howard University, and has written her dissertation on the earliest. Really our interest was, who is this W.D. Farad? Right? Imam Muhammad has talked about him and given us some insights into who he is, right? She dug into it like a scholar and wanted to find his role and what was his role in the relationship to our community and introducing the Quran.
You can also Google her.
You can Google her. In fact, you can listen to her speak. She's speaking in Baltimore at the Islamic Cultural Center, Muslim Cultural Center in Baltimore, maybe 3 or 4 years ago. And she gives it's a very brief lecture that she gives on the history, on the beginning. we don't like to hear that, you know. What I found is when you start saying, oh, the Ahmadiyya, you know, but the reality is that's where it came from. The Quran didn't fall out of the sky and all of a sudden everything Muhammad had a Quran. It came in a particular social context, in a particular historical context, and for a reason. So it's important to look at that. I could go on and on and on, but it's going to be close to the time to break out fast. Any questions? Any comments?
I'd like to make a comment.
Yes, sir.
I've heard the Imam say he wasn't really ready to lead until 2 years before 1975. When I was put in contact, he was born in 33. So he was probably 40, 41. He really thought he wanted to lead because he's really taking leadership at different stages, but he was wrong.
And you know what? He was respectful of him. He respected his father, loved his father very much, respected the community, knew what he had, knew what his father had invested in him, but also understood strategy, right? And understood that he needed to go slow. And now look what's becoming beautiful Muslim community, right? So this is one more book I want to recommend to you. It's called The Quran, a Biography by Bruce Lawrence. Bruce. Khan, you probably have this book, don't you?
Yeah, I had it. I'm trying to think of the brother that was really selling that book, though. But
So,
I have the purpose.
Bruce Lawrence, he was Dr. Jamila Kareem, our Dr. Jamila Kareem, her advisor at Duke. And he's written a book, The Quran Biography, and in one chapter, he spends an entire chapter on Imam Muhammad and his relationship with the Quran. It's called the chapter 13, W.B. Muhammad, Quran as Guide to Racial Equality. Okay, so I recommend that, and we'll look at it next week. We'll go over it. Okay. Thank you very much. Let's close with dua and blessed Ramadan. ربنا آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار ربنا لا تزغ قلوبنا بعد إذ هديتنا وهب لنا من لدنك رحمة إنك أنت الوهاب. That's exactly the word I'm going to use. They want to use that word missionary.
I see it.
Well, I go to my notes. Yeah,
Or anybody else.
Indians coming from Muslims who are missionaries, they even call themselves. They you know, I know. Yeah. But that's what they were doing. They were doing in 1930. They were missionaries to America. No, they were missionaries to just
Put them in.
I think the fact shows is that really was a strategy to bring Islam into America. And we didn't have time to talk about their strategy. They were aiming
in another direction because I'm not
it's an uncomfortable missionary because we think oftentimes in the Christian context.
But that's
were,
right.
and I come from that too, but they were missionaries in the sense that they wanted to bring Islam to America.
But I can even go ahead.
When the ugly last. Wasn't a body, governing body.
It was a body of
It wasn't easy decision. It wasn't easy decision. But the people who had
His Father himself gave us a proof. Nathan gave us a proof that he should be.
So he didn't actually, but some people said his father said that what you did was supposed to do.
Yeah, he didn't say directly. He did give movement to where some ministers themselves said yes. Otherwise, you know, he said why it should be this.
I just